Well, hello there. My name is Bob Segworth with Lake Sumter State College. I'm one of the instructors here at the Engineering Technology Relay Tech Specialization Program. And this morning we're going to do a distribution class feeder breaker protection trip and reclose check. What you have before you is a self-contained feeder breaker. You have a distribution class breaker. It's an OCB. It is a 15 kV OCB. OCB meaning that it is an oil circuit breaker. It has a standard mechanism with stored energy. You can see the mechanical indicator or semaphore that's very important to make note of. You have your standard components within the mechanism cabinet itself. Now back to the protective relays and the reclosing relays. We want to do a quick functional trip and reclose check. But before you begin any work, make sure that you have your pre-job briefing. Make sure that you're aware of your surroundings, and you want to make sure that the breaker has been fully isolated either through lockout, tagout, or whatever procedure that your company or school recommends. But make sure that you're working in a safe state. First, I like to prove that the breaker is normal as far as an operational perspective. I noticed that this breaker is in the open position. You can see the green indicating light, but I always like to make sure that I check the mechanical indicator, and the mechanical indicator also says that the breaker is open. What I'd like to do is I'd like to close the breaker and make sure that the ACR relay is reset. These are your phase overcurrent relays. This is your ground overcurrent relay, and this is your reclosing relay. These are all General Electric devices. These overcurrent relays are the GE IAC53B type, as well as the phase and the ground, and this is a GE ACR reclosing relay. But before we begin our functional trip and reclose check, I want to close the breaker to prove that it's electrically operative, and we'll wait for the ACR relay to reset. Right now it's at lockout. You'll see this drum spin around. Let's go ahead and close the breaker, and we'll make sure that we can reset the ACR relay so that we start with a normal breaker and at reset. You'll hear a loud bang as the breaker transitions from open to close, and you'll see the red light here. And the ACR relay should reset here in just a few seconds, which it did. Alright, so we're starting with a closed breaker. The ACR relay is reset. I always like to start with resetting the targets, being very careful here because there is 130 volts DC potential, so you've got to be very careful. I do have an insulated stick here that I use for manipulating the relays to operate them. Alright, notice that the ground relay cutout switch is on, the ACR reclosing switch is on, and we have a supervisory switch here that I've got turned to off to disable remote control. Alright, I always like to prove the cutout switches work properly. And what we'll do is we'll turn them to off. We'll go ahead and trip the ground relay, and with the ground relay cutout switch off, I should not be able to trip my breaker. You can see that the breaker is closed right now. So I'm going to manipulate the induction disc, moving the moving contact around, the tripping contact around, to prove that it doesn't trip. And you can see that I've got the contact made up and it doesn't trip. Alright, we'll go ahead and turn the ground relay switch on. We'll leave the reclosing switch off, and we'll demonstrate that that's working properly as well. Now with the ground relay cutout switch on, I should be able to trip this breaker. And you can see that the breaker did trip and that I pulled a ground time target. What I'd like to do now is turn the auto reclosing switch on. You'll see the reclosing relay, the drum, actually start to rotate and close the breaker here shortly. So let's go ahead and turn the auto reclosing switch on and call for an auto reclose. And you can see right now the breaker's open. Alright, in just a second or two here, the breaker closed. That was due to the reclosing relay. We want to make sure though that We start with a reset reclosing relay, so we'll give it just a couple of seconds here to run around to its reset position. We'll talk just a little bit more about the self-contained feeder as we're waiting on the ACR relay to reset. These are your amp meters. These are your phase amp meters. This is your ground amp meter. Of course, this is the breaker control switch. The indicating lights, we've talked a little bit about this already, the ground relay cutout switch, the auto reclosing relay cutout switch, and the supervisory cutout switch. All right, we have the ACR now at reset. This particular self-contained feeder is using the fuse save scheme design, and the fuse save is a type of coordination. This particular fuse save scheme, after the first trip, cuts out all phase and ground instantaneous, but it leaves the time elements, both phase and ground, enabled. So let's go ahead and trip the breaker with our ground relay, and you'll see the relay pull a target. And then what we'll do is we'll allow the ACR relay to reclose, and you'll see I'll demonstrate that it cuts out all instantaneous, both phase and ground. So let's go ahead and trip the relay with the ground time element. All right, it tripped the breaker. We'll allow it to reclose before, and you can see that it disables all ground instantaneous, A phase instantaneous, B phase instantaneous, and C phase instantaneous, but yet it will still trip phase time. We'll allow the ACR relay to reclose here. It should take just a few seconds here for it to reclose, which it did. We want to prove that we can now trip with the rest of the phase time elements. And I believe we have one auto reclose shot left. This particular reclosing relay is set up for 3 auto reclose attempts. And we'll let the breaker close, and we'll prove that we can trip with the C phase time element. And you can see that the breaker did trip. That was a full 3 shots, and now the ACR relay will go to lockout. And the term lockout means that it's attempted 3 reclose shots or close, and after that 3rd attempt, if the breaker still sees the fault through the overcurrent relays, it will not attempt to reclose any further. So this reclosing relay will continue to run to lockout. You can see the drum spinning, and at this point in time the feeder would stay open until someone was dispatched to the substation to do further investigation about the feeder fault. So that concludes this particular trip and reclose check on this distribution class feeder breaker. We are talking about the General Electric IAC 53B overcurrent relays, both phase and ground, and the GE ACR relay. Thank you for watching this video.